Welcome to a video series I decided I'd like to do, mostly to share the knowledge of building helmets. And particularly, this is during the process of me rebuilding a ODST suit of armor from Halo. And this kind of first bit will be talking specifically about the tools I use, some of the ups and downs of certain adhesives used, and also just kind of generally talking a little bit about the processes of building helmets. So, kind of the first thing to go off of is material. Are you going to 3D print, or are you going to do what I do, which is scratch build from foam, from EVA foam, or floor matting as it's more commonly known as. I prefer EVA foam mostly because just it's what I have experience with, and also 3D printers that can print helmets are expensive, but they're cheaper than they ever have been. And I wouldn't begrudge anyone for wanting to 3D print a helmet, because it means you can save hours upon hours of time on you for building. But for me personally, for armor and most of prop related things, like especially when it comes to cosplay, I prefer EVA foam because you got that flexibleness of EVA foam. It can take a beating pretty good, and it just kind of it mostly just works really well for me thus far, and I don't have to worry about dropping anything, because I can't tell you how many times I've dropped these helmets and they're fine. But of course, to start you need a few tools if you want to start doing anything with EVA and start working with foam and doing foam smithing work. And of course, one of the easiest things you can start out with is a box cutter, one of these Stendo boys. And you don't have to have a super expensive one. I think probably the most expensive one I've ever seen was like $15. And just get one that suits you. You can even just stick with the cheapo ones from Walmart. That's what I did for a while. If you have big hands, wouldn't suggest it, because those things are tiny. Another really important piece is actually two knives, not just a box cutter, but also X-Acto blades of some varying quality and type, because X-Acto blades are just for those tiny little cuts you're going to need. And again, also pretty cheap, so nothing too crazy. But that's also another thing I want to show, is I want to show how cheap it is to actually do this. Obviously, you can buy specialized tools. You can have, there's people I know who use laser CNC machines and stuff like that. Like, you go if you have that, but not all of those can afford that kind of stuff. And so I really want to show that just a little bit of grit and determination you can make something like this. Another important part, because I don't just magically know the shape. I use patterns from a website called Epicura. Well, more of Epicura's is kind of like a CAD software would be the best way to describe it. And it takes paper, because it's basically for origami, and allows you to turn it into a 3D object. And you get a bunch of pieces of paper that you print it out on. I can't see it from there, but I promise you there's stuff on here. But you need a pen to put it onto the foam, which of course you can also use Sharpie or any other tool to your liking. If you want to be particularly pedantic, you can use a scribe tool like most woodworkers do. Another thing that's useful to have is a ruler, a small ruler or big ruler. I have a large metal ruler which I use for wider cuts, but this is just mostly useful for patterning work more than anything else. And it's nice to have. But now comes a real big question, which every prop maker or maker in general has to ask themselves, which is, what glue to use? And these kind of represent the 3 different kinds of glues I have used. This one, technically speaking, uses all 3, but mostly 1, because there's certain things where it's just better to have other glues. But this one, which is the first one I ever did, I did this for a old harvest festival back in the day, just because, I was a huge nerd as a kid. Big surprise, look at the way I'm dressed. But the glue I use for that is over here, there we go, is super glue. And super glue I would not recommend for building an entire suit of armor. 1, it's expensive as heck. Like, I went through so much super glue when I made that. But, it is kind of nice because it dries pretty quickly. But it also the problem is super glue is a lot more brittle. Like, a lot more brittle. It really causes a lot of problems when it comes to that. You also just kind of need to take into consideration that, it's kind of harder to get really good seams with it. Because that's kind of one really big problem with this particular helmet. I don't know how well it comes up on the camera, but the seams on this, 1, are horrible because I didn't know what I was doing. 2 are also horrible because just the nature of super glue isn't very fun to work with. But it is an option if you want to use it. I would suggest to use it for very small pieces, like I use it for the fins right here on this helmet, which, that works fine, but don't use it for the whole entire thing. The other sort of glue, which I use on this entire suit, which I'm rebuilding, is hot glue. Good old cheap hot glue. And it's great. It bonds very well to EVA foam, because if you don't know, it's actually a similar compound chemically to EVA. It's actually also the same thing your Crocs are made out of. I'll just leave that where it is. But it works very well. It's very budget friendly, but I will admit it's not fun. It is a drag to use, because I can say from building an entire suit with it, it about triples the time it takes, because you are constantly just sitting there. You have 2 pieces of foam, you push them together, and you sit there and wait. You blow on it, you wait. Maybe you try to smooth it out by dipping your fingers in water. You can smooth out hot glue really nicely. You sit there, you wait, and then, okay, you think it's dry, you go to let go, and it splays apart. You push it back together real quick. It causes all sorts of problems. But it's really safe, non-toxic. I mean, you will burn your fingers. I have plenty of burns on my hands from hot glue over the years. But again, like, at the end of the day, if you especially are going for cheap, it's fantastic. It's a great option. But I wouldn't suggest building a whole suit, but you definitely can. As I said, I did. It's just time-wise. If you have time, do it. Go for it. Why not? But now let's talk about the third option that I use to build this beautiful helmet, which is a much better helmet than this, because mostly it fits my head. I know that's a remarkable thing, because that's when someone was talking about patterning, and how that works is that you have to be very careful about scale. But the glue I use for this is probably slightly large contact cement, which comes in these little tubs. You can also buy giant tubs of it, but it's very expensive. And that is one of the downsides, is that, it's more expensive. And also it's just a little more dangerous. You need to have some form of respiration protection, or a well-ventilated room is also some meaning for this. And it's pretty toxic, but it's great because you just add it to both surfaces. You then let it dry for a couple of minutes, but you can be doing other things while it's drying. You don't have to hold those pieces. And then once it's added, like, a tackiness is the best way to describe it, then just attach them together and boom, you're done. I still sometimes, for sanity's sake, I'll add hot glue onto a joint. I put that on, but it just, hot glue is one of those, it's basically a sanity keeper of like, hey, this is a very stressed section of the helmet, or of the armor, put a little bit more hot glue on there to give it that little extra pizzazz, you know? Yeah, that's honestly probably going to be your best option. It is a little bit more expensive. Kind of same thing with foam. Well, this is, you know, cheapo floor matting. You can also buy a more expensive version, which I prefer, but sometimes I just want to use the cheaper stuff. Which the more expensive stuff is known as HD foam, and you don't get as much bang for your buck out of it, but what you do get out of it is very good looking foam, which is what this is mostly made out of. It's just that kind of stuff, and it's very good looking. Just kind of gives a different professional look to things. Is the easiest way for me to describe that. But yeah, no, you know, this is kind of like your first dive in, and you just want to look into like kind of the beginning of stuff. I hope this series can kind of show you how easy this can be, because I'm not gonna lie, there's hard parts, like learning how to decipher Epicura files is a pain in the butt, but I hope I can kind of demystify some of that, and also hopefully, you know, you can learn something and be inspired to do this yourself, because that's kind of how I started this. Because I saw a video online, saw that people made this stuff, and I was like, you know what, I want to do that, and I started doing it. And hopefully throughout this series, again, you know, you can learn something, and if maybe I'm somehow entertaining to you and you somehow learn something out of my ramblings, you know, you might be willing to hit the little subscribe button down below and maybe even leave a like or a comment. So, thank you. I'll see you in the next part. We'll be talking about patterning.